Welcome to our velocity-based training series brought to you by GymAware. My name is Lachlan. I'm the director here at Athletes Authority, and over the next 10 modules, we're going to get stuck into the crux of VBT or velocity-based training. There are a number of options we can look at when we talk about measuring velocity-based training and actually what we're looking for as outcomes as well. There is some really simple ways to use VBT and some very complex ways to use it. Now, myself, I'm a coach at heart and always will be. So whenever I look at VBT work, it needs to be practical and needs to be able to be utilized on a gym floor, often with a number of athletes flowing through. Here at Athletes Authority, we have a range of athletic population. We have athletes that come in on a semi-private model where there's only a handful at once, but we also have busy periods where we have 20, 30 athletes rolling through the gym floor at once. So it's important for us to really know how to utilize VBT and what the best approaches are. Over the next 10 modules, we're going to go through some of the key things we look at, some of the key outcomes we target, but also how do we actually practically implement VBT and what it's about within our training environment. When we look at the products on the market, there's a number of them. And typically, these can range from simple linear transducer options all the way through to complex algorithms that are used with video-based options. Now, we want to obviously make sure what we choose and how we select it, that it's going to be accurate for our athletes. Because if we're judging them on the outcomes, if we're tracking their velocities, the power output that they're doing, we need to make sure that we trust the data. I've used a number of different VBT units over my years, and GymAware has always come back as being the number one, most accurate, most reliable, and one that I can actually put and hang my hat on when I'm talking to athletes. In particular, when I'm judging them for not being fast enough or powerful enough with a set, I know the data I'm seeing is accurate. So when we go through everything over the next 10 modules, I'm going to be using GymAware's equipment. We have both a flex unit and then our standard linear transducer. The linear transducer is done off a tether. So as you can see, it is a basic unit that we pull through that actually measures the distance accurately and therefore can start to ascertain the velocity very accurately. But there's also the flex unit that sits at the end of the bar. Flex unit requires a reflective mat, which does allow a little bit of freedom, and it's a lot cheaper as an option. But either of them can be really accurate and utilized, and I'm going to show you how we use both options throughout our environment. When we talk about velocity-based training, often it is a little bit misconstrued, and people may not understand exactly how we implement into a normal training environment. Often people think of VBT as this entire overhaul of their program, where they're tracking every single movement, every list, and they're using all the velocity prescriptions that are allowable for that lift. When we look at it, we try and make sure that it is a method within our training system. So if you believe so wholeheartedly on VBT within your population, and when I say that, it may be Olympic lifters, power lifters, where the ability to track every lift is a little bit easier, then certainly it's a great method for that. But if you're in a dynamic environment, maybe working with team sport athletes or a multitude of athletic populations, it may not be as easy just to implement VBT across the board. So what we want to look at is how we can utilize the method of VBT within a really structured framework that you may already use and continue to get the results and outcomes that you currently get, but we now add another nuance that can help you out. So the best way to look at VBT and how it might apply in these environments is to understand that velocity is simply another measure or prescription that we can utilize. We have load, we have sets, reps, tempo. These type of options are really malleable and we can manipulate these to create an outcome for our athletes. When we look at velocity, it's exactly the same thing. We can then prescribe and have a target for what the velocity is going to be for that lift, for that rep, that set, to make sure that we're achieving the best outcome possible and an outcome that we can track, measure, and influence over time. So as I said before, it's not this huge overhaul that a lot of people think. It is simply taking another measure that we can utilize in the gym and usually in a gym environment and how we can start to prescribe off it to gain a greater outcome for our athletes across both power, speed, and even hypertrophy. So what you'll see over the coming modules is we're going to be using a few products in particular, and to give you a bit of a rundown to make sure you're clear, we'll always be using an iPad. You'll see the iPad connects to the cloud-based software of GymAware. It allows us to have a live feedback unit for the athlete, both from a rep to rep, set to set comparison. It'll have both their velocity options we can select, but also power and height velocities, and we'll go through that in one of our modules. But we're always going to be utilizing an iPad that is either connected to the RS unit or a linear position transducer, which is this guy here. He connects to the bar, so tracks the bar velocity specifically, or we're going to be linking up wirelessly to our flex unit here. This is a wireless unit, Bluetooth, that uses a reflective type option when we put out our reflective mat, and it sits at the end of the bar, so it can then receive some infrared feedback that also feeds back to our app as the RS unit does as well. So just so you're aware, as we go through the modules, you'll see these used, you'll see them utilized, but it gives a little bit of context before we move forward. Now we've set the scene, let's get stuck into the next 9 modules. Across these 9 modules, we're going to go through a lot of information. We're going to look at how we actually utilize the system in a testing and assessment standpoint, how we practically apply that on the gym floor with lifts and specific outcomes for our athletes, but also start to tick through how we use it within the rehab setting as well. Finally, we're going to wrap it up in a bit of a case study to give you a real-world example of how we've utilized it here in a very simple format.